Hello, everyone. I'm Will Parrinello, documentary filmmaker. My recent film, Water for Life, premiered on PBS on Earth Day. And I'm excited to be here talking with filmmakers Gastón Zilberman and Michael Salama, filmmakers of Qotzuñi. And it's an amazing film. And I'm excited for you guys because you've received some amazing recognition. I believe it was Grand Jury Prize at Doc NYC last year, and now it's shortlisted for Best Doc 2025. And and perhaps even more exciting than that, more noteworthy, the film is officially qualified for the Academy Award this year for short doc. So congratulations, and maybe you guys can begin by telling me a little bit about the film. Give the audience like a little thumbnail sketch of the story.
So the story is about a Bolivian indigenous community and its connection to a lake that disappeared because of climate change and mining. And that's kind of our short synopsis, but it's much more than that in a way of the complexity of this story and trying to also communicate it in the most simple way as possible and concrete. And so it's a short that it's 13 minutes. And well, we're really happy also to be here with you. So thank you very much. And happy to keep on having this conversation and also going into the relations of the things that you also do in your documentaries and us. I think that it's really cool to have you here. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was really moved by in the film, here's a community of people who have lived on a lake that's immense in size. If I have the numbers correctly, is it 3,000 square kilometers? So that's like I looked it up. That's the size of Rhode Island. It's huge, and I remember as a child seeing images of this lake. People live in reed houses, and they travel on reed boats. It's kind of this otherworldly place, and for the indigenous people of the lake, I mean, it's obviously a sacred thing, but it's also their lifeblood. They fish they hunt, they do everything there. And this lake has completely dried up. I was practically in tears when I watched the film because I had no idea this had happened. Can you begin by talking about the meaning of the lake to the people and how it dried up and kind of just that sort of devastation?
Absolutely. So, like you said, I mean, if you had heard of the Urus and their reed homes as a child, I think you would be much more informed than most children because, even I came to the community studying water issues in the region, and I didn't quite know about it until I arrived. And people said, "Oh, if you want to know about water access and mining and how those two things are involved with one another, you have to go to Lake Popo." So Lake Popo is the name of this lake. It was the second largest in Bolivia, and you got it right on 3,000 square kilometers. The name of the community and the people is the Uru Indigenous Nation. And yes, they lived for centuries. The oldest historical records from when the conquistadors came, they said these are these Urus. They lived in totora reed homes on these lakes, Lake Titicaca, Lake Uru Uru, and Lake Popo. And yes, 10 years ago, it completely disappeared. And what that means, of course, it has a massive impact on the economy because they were fishermen, they were hunters, and what they didn't eat, they sold, and that was how they made their living. But it was so much more than that. It was their cultural epicenter. Like we know the term Pachamama from Mother Earth, but they called it Kota Mama, Kota meaning lake, Qotzuñi meaning people of the lake, that it was the center of their culture, of their world. It was the thing that gave them life and livelihood. And when that disappears, what does that mean for a community? And I think that is what is at the essence of the film. And that is also the essence of the message we want to give more broadly than the Urus. And of course, it's such an urgent issue. We want to bring impact to the Urus themselves, but it's that we are all people of the lake. Right? The lake didn't just dry up for them. It dried up for all of us. And as we see these environmental and these water disasters happening across the world, it's going to be affecting indigenous people first, but it's really something we all need to be caring about. And I think that's the essence of the project.
That's fantastic. Really well articulated. The people have, I mean, they're beautiful people, they have this strength, even though they have lost so much. And you see that in their faces in the film. There's this real power that they carry, and yet they've had this devastating loss. And, it's a story that could, I think, easily leave people feeling desperate because to lose a lake like that, it's kind of mind-boggling. But the film has this wonderful turn, and the women in the community, and I'm not sure, I'm kind of curious to dig into what their roles were when there was fishing and hunting, but the women take up the slack in terms of providing a way for people to support themselves through creating artifacts. I'm sorry, handicrafts. They become artisans, and they're making hats and bags and baskets and little miniature versions of the boats that they used to use on the lake. And maybe you can talk about that sense of survival and resilience and what it is in the Uru people, right? I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes.
And did the women have those crafts in the past? Maybe just talk about that sort of survival instinct, if you will.
Yeah, so this is a story that ties the identity of this people and also what how that affects what they do today and how resilient they are. As you said, it's something that we like to say that it's a story of resilience because it's not that they obviously lost so much, but they're working in a lot of ways to keep their culture and their identity alive. And the arts craft, it's something that they did forever, but it wasn't their main source of income as it is now. Because now the men have to work in the very same mines that stole their lake. And the women are basically doing a lot of carrying out a lot of family businesses, which were also working with family businesses uh, as a part of the impact project of the film. And it's changed that the art crafts were always there as symbolisms of their life, but not as their main, activity, economic activity now. And also the not just the main economic activity, but also one of the main symbolic activities that they do because they represent their old way of life, before the transformation that they suffered of late.
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable, and I think that the survival instinct is so strong that it's undeniable. I'm kind of going to bounce back to the environmental aspect because you talked about mining, and I realized I didn't follow up to ask how has this lake been drained? Why is this lake dried up? How is it dried up? I mean, I'm familiar with mining and the impact that mining can have on water, but this is an incredible amount of water that's been, you know, taken, diverted. What happened?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of everything in a sense, and it's quite complex. And our short film at 13 minutes doesn't quite dive into all of these details because it is very emotional and wants to hook people in. But what happened was, so mining, there's a lot of tin mining in this belt of the Andes. They call it the Tin Belt of Bolivia. And they have cooperative mines, state-owned mines, and international mines. And they have diverted a lot of water. The Rio de Saguadero is the one that goes from Titicaca into Lake Popo, and then there's also ones small streams that come off the Andes and feed Lake Popo. And these have been diverted because the tin refinement process requires large quantities of water. And there's also been quinoa agriculture in the north, and water has gone to that too. And those are the big diversions. Another component of it is that mining has contaminated so much of the Rio de Saguadero and of those streams, which, when there is water, means that there's no more life in the lake. The fish and the waterfowl and the water as drinking domestic water is no longer viable. But it also, on top of that, has changed the pH, the salinity, and the temperature of the lake. So that 10 years ago, because it was only ever about a meter or a meter and a half in height, in depth, it caused it to be much more susceptible to evaporation. And so when there was a major El Nino in 2015, 2016, the drought that ensued meant that in combination with the mining and the diversions and the agriculture, that was really the death knell of the lake. And even now, so sometimes, like for example, last summer, there are heavy rains which unfortunately last year caused quite devastating floods because the land itself has not been prepared for that and the infrastructure either. But when that water does return, it doesn't provide the economic dependence that it used to. And that is also just a very difficult thing. So they're looking for other sources of food because even the land itself is contaminated. They can't grow crops because the groundwater and the soil has arsenic, has mercury, and has other heavy metals and chemicals.
I mean, I think one of the things that you did so beautifully in the film was to show the people and see that their daily life and show their beauty. I mean, they are just beautiful people. And there is this austere beauty to the lake, even dried up. And you guys show some incredible images that give us a sense of what's been lost. We see boats that, kind of look like skeletons now because they've been abandoned and they're rotting in the sun and rusting from the salt, I presume, and bicycles embedded in the lake and dead ducks that are there. Um, and you show us you tell us the environmental story. We get that it's mining that has had a devastation on it, and we see some incredible images. But you find the right balance. And I think the strength of the film is that we care about the people. And if we care about the people and their lives, then we care about the issue. And I wonder what your intentionality was going in making the film. Did you understand that you were going to tell a human story as opposed to an environmental story, or one that informed the other? And how did you come to the form that you chose in telling the story on film?
Well, I think that we made a process that started wanting to make environmental and more like, okay, a lake dried up. And you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that one of the first or second night in that we were in Bolivia together, we were like brainstorming and we were like, the story is not the lake. The story is that people that live in it and how it's their connection to it. And then it was like an insight that we both had together, and we said like, I think it's that way. So we started thinking about, okay, which people we want like to hear the story from, and started working around that. And the title came to us because in the third interview that we had, they were saying like, yeah, because we are Qotzuñis, people of lake. We're Qotzuñis, people of lake. We looked at each other and it was like, that's it. It's the people of the lake that the story is about and not the lake itself. And then it was a really organic process in constant collaboration with the community, trying to get the best conversations possible. And they were really wanted to show their story to us and take us to their abandoned boats, because it wasn't just random boats. It was the boat of the people that are in that, like that you could see in the image. So it's a really powerful story since the beginning, not just because of the environmental phenomenon that a lake disappeared that had the size of 7 times La Paz, Bolivia, or 4 times New York City. And it's the people that live in it and how connected they are, and the loss of the lake. It's not like just there's no more water, there's no more water, no more life, and a lot of changes of of the people that depend on that life, that water for life.
It takes special human beings to go into a community that isn't your own in another country and to create the kind of relationship that you obviously created, right, with these folks, and to gain their trust and to, in a sense, I assume, partner with them. Can you talk about that process and how you went in and were able to create that relationship and the respect that you did have to show and the partnership, I presume, that you have with them in making the film?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like Gaston said, we didn't arrive and say, this is what we want to do, right? In fact, we didn't even arrive knowing what we wanted to do. I got there doing an academic project, really, about the history of the lake. And Gasti was there doing photography around Bolivia, and we kind of met by chance because I was kind of, I met with the authorities. I kind of presented who I was and why I was there and why I wanted to do, at that point, an academic project. And they told me, many people have come, like you, from abroad, from wherever. They've, said the same things. They've taken our words, they've taken our pictures, and they've disappeared, and we've never heard from them again. and we don't want that to happen again. And that was really powerful to hear. I, of course, don't I want to buck that trend. And so Gassi and I really, what we did was we worked together with Florencio, who at the time was the maximum authority. So he came on as when we decided together, okay, it seems like a documentary is how we can use our skills to bring this to the world. We can't bring the water back to the lake, but what we can do is work together to amplify the story of the Urus to the world, like we're doing now, I hope. Um, and so, yeah, so he helped us trying to kind of craft that narrative from, which communities, which families to speak to, even how to set up certain things like that shot at the end where they're in that boat. That was them. They got in the boat. They said, "Hey, I think this would be a great thing. Like, let's do this." So the collaboration was from the onset because people have exploited the community for this story, which is a really tragic thing. After they've been exploited in so many different ways, to have the same happen from people who purport to want to help is very difficult. And so we've been trying really nonstop to not do that as well. And that doesn't stop when the film is over. We stopped filming 2 years ago, and we've been still working every day in terms of impact to bring resources and to help translate the film into things on the ground. And we're always in contact with the community. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. That intentionality and that respect is what it takes, and that's what gives you integrity. So, my hat's off to you for doing that. And it's clear in the film that you achieve that you have that strong relationship. I want to talk about impact, but first, you said something that made me think more about the visual aspect of the film. It's beautiful in so many ways. The way that you photographed it, Gaston, your respect for the indigenous people that we just spoke of, which is obvious, and how you let them tell their own story, right? There's no narration. You choose to use a couple of graphics to convey some information. But can you talk a little bit about the visual style and the storytelling visual style for the film and how you came to that? I want to just pay you a compliment. The scene, this is what made me think of this. When you mentioned, Michael, the scene where we see the men in a boat on the dry lake and they're rowing. And I thought of Joshua Oppenheimer's The Act of Killing, which might seem like a strange analogy, but just visually, there were reenactments of things that happened in people's lives that was stunning. And so I'm just curious to know what was your visual motivation and what was your intention when when you decided to film the film. I hate to use the word shoot the film, but we're so accustomed
Yeah.
in using that phrase. When you chose to shoot the film a particular way.
Well, so my background is documentary photography. So, and this is my first film. I worked with kind of institutional filmmaking before, but this was the first time there was no, volunteers or a client or something. It was just the story itself and the way that we wanted to show it. And something that I realized after, long after making the film, is that somebody told me like that was also a photographer and then went to filmmaking. It's like maybe in your film, it's like you try to make each shot actual photograph, like work as both. So there is both. Also, there's a documentary, like a photography series that's also been exhibited. And my eye goes first to the photo, and then I say, okay, I'll film this. So that's kind of my visual process. And obviously, changing and expecting things to happen, and you have movement and you have a lot of decisions more to make. But my first glimpse, it's my photography side that looks at an image and I know looks at it with a certain possible composition and trying to make it, but it's a sad story, but trying to make it as beautiful as I can to get and to people's, not just hearts, but also eyes and to see something that I don't know if I would put one of those pictures on my wall, but it is it's like it's so much suffering, but it's showing it in the most, like loveful way maybe, and trying to make it as more, unique and stand as its own and independent if it's a frame of film or photography itself, and to tell a story with one shot. That's my goal. It's not always the way that I could do it. Trying that every shot that we do, especially with people, represents them in a cool way. And the ones that don't, or they're not used maybe in the edit, and trying to, you know, honor their story in the best way possible visually.
I mean, I think you achieved that, and it's interesting looking on your website, looking at the still photos, and they're stunning. I'm not surprised to hear you say that you've done a lot of work as a still photographer as well. And sometimes when someone
Thank
makes
you very
that
much.
trend, yeah, no,
Yeah, it's a lot. Like I don't know, a lot of people say it, and I realized it now, and it's really good to see it because it's something that also it's not maybe on purpose that I think it's things that happen organically, like the shot on the boat, that's what I wanted to add. It wasn't that we staged it, but it just happened. Then one of them said like, "Hey, start rowing." And it's like that's the magic also of documentary of bumping to stuff that you don't expect and trying to answer in the best way possible.
yeah, no, for sure. How about the editing process? What was that like for you? How did you find the through line in the edit room? What was your process like? Did you guys sort of write up an outline? Did you put scenes on cards? And how many iterations did it take? We don't literally need to know how many, but the process can take time. And oftentimes we go in with an idea and we implement that idea and we say, oh, intellectually that worked really well, but it stinks. And then you have to kind of
Yeah.
toss the deck up in the air and really edit the film. So, knowing that, I'm just curious to hear a little bit about the editing process and putting the story together.
Well, in terms of the story, we really tried to, I think, craft that with words and on paper, even before ever going to right into Premiere Pro. Like really trying to know, well, we said these are the components that we want to say. That the artisanship, for example, the scene at the end, that when they're there at the lake and performing a ritual for the water. So we really tried to understand, how can we take each person's story and craft something because it's not following a character, and in that way, it might be different from other documentary shorts that are character driven. That we follow different people. For example, the teacher. That we follow Florencio and Rufino, who has a museum in his house of all the birds. And so we really wanted to be able to craft something that told the story of the community as a whole and not just of one person or family, because I think, you know, the mindset of the community having experienced this loss as one together, it's a really kind of a uniform feeling. They have, of course, different experiences from the three villages and also each family, but we wanted to do something that was the community telling its story to the world rather than a single person telling their story to the world. And that was a major part of that decision.
Yeah, well, it works really well because I have to say that I was wanting to grab onto a character early on, or I was wondering who is going to be our protagonist here. And I gave that up. I might have thought it for 10 seconds because I feel like I get to know the community and I get to know enough individuals as people. I get a sense of them anyway, right? It's a short film, and yet I get a sense of who they are, that it works, and it works as a community, and that is a wonderful way of you paying tribute to them and paying tribute to that community. So, kudos, you pulled that off. Let's talk about impact. You mentioned impact a few minutes ago, Michael. Given the world that we're living in now, there are a number of nationalist leaders around the world, including right here in our own country, who have kind of taken control of the narrative and the idea
In
of
mine too, in my country too, in Argentina. So
so yeah, and we can go through the long list, right? Brazil, India, the list goes up. El Salvador. But given the times that we're in, where the environment is overlooked because we seem to have leaders who are more concerned about consumption than about conservation. And in a time of climate change, that's radical thought in my mind. We need to be more concerned about consuming less, but also less concerned with the rights of indigenous people, people of color, marginalized people who are not part of the mainstream. And so what are your hopes? What are your plans with the Impact campaign, and how do you want to move forward with it and get word out about the film and create the kind of change that you hope the film will create in the world?
Yeah, so we have two main impact goals that are the global impact and trying to make as many people as we can to watch it and to understand the story and to create empathy and awareness about the consequences of climate change in society and industrial pollution and human overdevelopment. And we want that to make happen as much local impact as possible and actual change in the community. So we want the film success internationally to transfer into actual change and development within the community. Since the very beginning of the project, we always talked about that. And our first, like what we said there is like we could publish some articles around the world, but then, well, a lot of things happened with the film. We had over 50 screenings in more than 18 countries till now, and it's been much more than what we thought. But then there's not they don't care so much about that, but they care what happens in their community. And after all of this international recognition, we were able to support them. And now we're entering stage 4 of help in funding family businesses as an alternative to people working in the mines and searching for sustainable economic development. And also, we want to give some grants to the community for projects within um, to help develop, that sense of resilience and to help them in a natural way and make it go beyond the screen and not just, stay in the 13 minutes that you watch in TV, but it goes much beyond that.
Yeah, and in a broader sense as well, I mean, looking at global politics, I do fear that when democracy is threatened, one of the first things that people and activists may forget about is the environment, right? Because people are, I think, scrambling to try and protect democracy in the United States. We can't forget about these crucial and urgent problems that are related to the environment globally and also to communities like the Urus in Bolivia, but also even in the United States or in Argentina and literally every country. We're seeing these problems pan out in, scarily similar ways. We have it here in the United States with a lot of the indigenous groups fighting for water rights still. And so we can't lose sight of that fact as especially it's a difficult time for documentaries. We're hoping that what we've been able to do with this project, which is take 13 minutes of a highly collaborative project and bring international resources to a vulnerable community, we're hoping that that is the first step in replicating with different communities around the world, not just us, but filmmakers all over, to hopefully bring more attention to what I think is so necessary.
I think you've achieved your goal in telling the story and in your collaboration with the community. And I think you're going to be very successful with the campaign. And I appreciate your articulation of how you want to move forward. It's been a pleasure talking with you guys today. Again, congratulations on the film. I know you're going to have great success, continued great success moving forward. And I want to encourage Academy members to watch the film. And so, real pleasure, you guys. Good luck moving forward.
Thank you so much, Will. A pleasure
Our
talking
Thank
to
you.
you.
Thank you so much.